Welcome guys, welcome to a new lecture. As you can see, I shaved my beard and cut my hair to act more professional to you, for you. I think it's for you, I'm not sure. So today's lecture is going to be about dopamine. Dopamine it is. So what is dopamine? So dopamine basically is a neuromodulator. It is not a neurotransmitter, because I think you might have heard neurotransmitter more often than neuromodulator, but there's a significant difference between them. And the difference between a neuromodulator and neurotransmitter is that in comparison to a neurotransmitter, a neuromodulator has a way of communicating with way more neurons at the same time. So it has a vast coordinate system in terms of signaling messages, or let's say signals, to neurons at a very coordinate way, let's say. So this is basically the difference between neuromodulator and neurotransmitter. So a neurotransmitter has a more very near a narrow space, let's say, in terms of communicating with neurons. So this is the main difference, let's say. And what it influences is that dopamine, when it's released in the brain, it can either activate some neural circuits or inactivate, shut it down, depending on the probability, of course. And dopamine has many influences in the brain or in the person itself when it's released. So it can have an influence on your way of feeling. So the feeling of doubts, for example, or the feeling of driving for something. So drive, motivation, or craving. So for example, if you're craving for some type of food, dopamine is released in that specific manner. But to speak about dopamine in general and what it does in all its effects in the brain, we have to speak about the certain pathways that exist that dopamine undergoes. So the first pathway is called the ventral tegmentum, which means the bottom floor of the brain. So it's the area or the pathway of the brain that lies at the very bottom, at the very floor of the brain, let's say. And so it undergoes to this pathway to the ventral striatum, which has another pathway which is called the mesocortical limbic pathway. So hopefully I spelled it correctly, but this is actually the name of the pathway. And basically, once dopamine undergoes that pathway, it influences your motivation, your craving, and also your drive. So in a lot of ways, what happens is when you're taking certain drugs, for example, it can disrupt this pathway. But other than that, that was basically the biological perspective of dopamine. But let's talk about the psychological perspective, which is very important to understand when taking drugs, what it does. And I'm going to explain it by a graph. With that graph, you will be able to understand what it actually does when you're taking, for example, drugs or eating certain foods, etc. So stay tuned for the psychological level. So here we go. I'm going to make a record of this. So as you can see, I will make a graph on the very iPad that I'm using, and I will do that explanation from this side, so from this point of view, so you can have a better look when I'm drawing and explaining at the same time. So as you can see here, you have at the Y axis the dopamine level, and at the X axis you have the time, basically, because the dopamine level depends on time. And you have what I've marked here, a certain dopamine limit level. So when you hit this plateau, it means basically that there is no more dopamine that can be exceeded. So you hit this plateau of, you are this much happy, or you are this much for thrive, and this is where your limit is. And by taking drugs, you will see, I'm going to point it out, that you will reach that limit very fast. So let's take, for example, in terms of a psychological level and a neurological level too, what dopamine does when you're taking certain drugs, for example, cocaine. So firstly, what happens is that when you're taking it, you will have a very fast increase in terms of the time in dopamine. So your dopamine level will be very fast at the top. So at the limit, you will reach very fast the limit dopamine level, and probably at a certain time it will drop. So this is something what I call the first time using it. So you can see that you have a very proportional so you have a very proportional line that stacks up and then decreases over time. So you are not addicted yet, but you want to have that feeling again. So you want to reach that dopamine level again, and what you basically do, you will take eventually that drug. We are talking about cocaine, but we can also talk about other drugs. We can also talk about certain foods that you're craving that are most of the time very unhealthy. So I will draw with another color. What happens is, when you're taking it again, is that you are going to see the same line basically, but the main point is that you will drop way faster. So when let me draw this here longer so you can understand what I'm talking here. So you have the x-axis, that is time. So what happens is, in comparison to the first time, the time that is needed to drop in the first time, so the time that is needed to drop so that dopamine decreases will take more time, let's say, than the second time. The second time, in order to dopamine decreases, it takes way less time. So you have T drop 1, so the first time, and then you have T drop 2, second time. And this is basically what a drug does, is that you hit the plateau very fast, but after hitting a plateau, the dopamine level decreases faster and faster over and over. And the only thing that you want is to taking the drug again and again, because you just want to have that feeling again. But the drop of the dopamine level will decrease faster and faster. So by taking it again and again, you will see, I will mark this with another color, so you will hit the plateau again. So you have always this straight line, but then it goes faster and faster until you reach a point where you are basically addicted. That means that your body is so used to that drug that it just is dependent in order to be fulfilled in life. It's just dependent on that specific drug, because otherwise being at this very state here means that your dopamine levels are so low when not taking this specific drug that you just feel miserable. Let's say, let me do this correctly. You just feel miserable in that specific area. So let me draw here the same graph, but so you have dopamine level and the time. So regardless to the drugs that you are taking, and speaking about happiness in general, so what am I doing here? So this is dopamine level, excuse me for that. So this is the y-axis, and time, it's the x-axis. So speaking about happiness in general and what you want when dopamine is evolved. So you have the powerful dopamine limit. So I call it dopamine limit level, you know. So I call it dopamine limit level. What you always want, let's say that this is low level and this is already pretty high level. So this is, we can say that this is the lowest level, this is the high level, and this is the super level. Very happy, very motivational feeling, let's say. So this is in some way the middle level of dopamine, and what you want in life is something like this. So you have the high level, and then you have the middle level where you just feel normal, feeling, let's say, feeling normal, and here you are feeling miserable, feeling miserable, like this, feeling miserable. So you always want to have some kind of fluctuation. So sometimes it can go low, sometimes it can be there, and sometimes it can be there and there, and sometimes you feel very motivated. So we can say that it doesn't matter how you feel, if you're exceeding, let's say, the highest level and you are feeling great, motivated for some time, or you just feel miserable. It doesn't really matter. What matters is that you try to stay in this, more or less in this middle level. So your optimal way of view is, you don't necessarily have to be always completely motivated and, you know, very thriving for, let's say. You always try to stay, if you're looking for something more optimized, you always try to be in this middle level of dopamine level, let's say, in this middle dopamine level. So you always try to be in this specific range. So this is the optimized range where you try to be. So you sometimes you feel better than normal, you feel less than normal sometimes. So and sometimes it can occur that you feel very motivated, but you always try to be in this in this middle line. So this is what happiness, my point of view, is this is something that you want to achieve, is to fluctuate between this middle level. And so this is the optimized level. And this is basically it. And you can actually boost your dopamine level, very, very naturally. There are some methods that can facilitate that. For example, having a cold bath. There are several studies who have shown that taking a cold bath, for example, in the morning, can boost your dopamine level. Or, for example, getting some sunlight in the morning. Also, in general, having goals, aiming for something, having a clue what you do in the journey to make the several steps, can have a very good effect on your dopamine. So something to thrive in general in life, so your brain is also active, is something that you're looking for, to have a stabilized dopamine level, more or less. So hopefully you enjoyed this very lecture of mine, and you have learned something, what dopamine actually is, and how impactful it is for our brain. So hit the like and subscribe button, and if you like more content like this, just give a thumb up, and